My name is Evelyn Carter, and I'm 62 years old. If you had asked me a year ago who I was, I would have said I'm a mother, a grandmother, a homemaker. I would have smiled through aching joints and worn hands, still proud to be useful in a world that often forgets women like me. I would have said those words with certainty, but it only took one sentence, 5 cruel little words to make me question everything. You're just a burden now. That's what my daughter said to me, my only child. And she didn't whisper it in a fit of emotion or say it by accident in the heat of a fight. No, she said it quietly, deliberately, like it had been sitting on her tongue for a long time, waiting. It happened on a cold, gray Tuesday morning. The kind of morning where your breath fogs up the kitchen window and the floor creaks with every step. I was up early as always preparing breakfast for her children, my grandchildren, Sammy and Layla. The house was still half asleep, silent but for the ticking of the wall clock and the occasional thud of a distant car door outside. I stood at the stove frying eggs with stiff, swollen fingers, my hip already screaming from the cold. "Mom," Claire said, walking into the kitchen, already dressed in her work blazer, holding her phone in one hand and a protein shake in the other. "I think it's time we talked." I turned around, wiping my hands on my apron. "Of course, honey. What about?" She didn't sit down. That should have been my first clue. She stayed standing near the doorway like she couldn't bear to come any closer. "I can't do this anymore," she said. "It's too much. You're always tired, always sick, always talking about how hard it is to get up and down the stairs. She stopped, took a breath, and then looked me dead in the eye. "You're just a burden now, Mom." For a second, I didn't understand the words. My mind simply rejected them. I thought maybe I'd heard wrong. A burden? Me? I had sold my house to help Claire with her mortgage. I gave up my privacy, my routine, my life, so I could move in and help with the kids. I cooked, I cleaned, I did school pickups, bedtime stories, bandaged knees, and made sure dinner was hot when she walked through the door. "I'm not asking for anything," I said quietly, my voice already trembling. "Just to stay. I don't want to be alone." "I know," she replied, "and I'm sorry, but I can't keep putting my family at risk. You've been sick twice this month already, and I can't afford for the kids, or me, to get whatever you have." I wanted to explain that it was just a cold, that I'd taken Tylenol, that I was careful, but her eyes had already moved past me. She wasn't listening. She wasn't interested. "I've looked into some temporary shelters," she continued, pulling out her phone and swiping through tabs like she was planning a vacation. "They'll take you even if you're not well, and I can give you here." She reached into her purse and pulled out a crumpled bill. One single bill. She laid it on the counter like it was something precious. $5. "That's bus fare," she said flatly, "and maybe something warm to drink." That's when it hit me, not just the words but the finality behind them. She had made up her mind. There was no room for negotiation. Her mother, the woman who once held her through fevers and sobbed silently at her graduation, was now a burden, an inconvenience to be managed. I didn't cry, not then. Something inside me had gone very still, a quietness that was louder than any scream. I walked to the hallway, picked up my old worn coat, the one with the broken zipper, and grabbed my rolling suitcase, the same one I'd used to pack up my life when I moved in with her. I looked up the stairs, hoping for one last glimpse of Sammy or Layla, but their door was closed, and Claire had already gone back to the kitchen. I stepped outside, coat open against the wind, the $5 clutched in my shaking hand, and just like that, I was homeless. Not because I had made mistakes, not because I had failed, but because the one person I had given everything to no longer saw me as anything worth keeping. But what I didn't know then, standing on that icy sidewalk with a broken heart and $5 crumpled in my pocket, was that this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. Before I continue, I want to ask all of you to please give a like to this video and subscribe to my channel, The Silent Stories, for more stories like mine. Your support means the world to me. Also, I'd love to know where you're watching from, so drop a comment telling me which country you're tuning in from. It's incredible to see how far this community of wonderful people has grown, and I'm so grateful to be able to share my story with you. The cold hit me like a slap. I stood on the curb outside my daughter's house. Well, not my daughter's house anymore, with nothing but a half-zipped coat, a worn suitcase, and a $5 bill crumpled in my fist. The winter wind blew sharp and angry, cutting through my clothes like I was made of paper. A few dry leaves scraped across the sidewalk. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once, then went quiet again. It was eerily still, quiet, like the world had decided I didn't belong in it anymore. My legs were shaking, not just from the cold but from shock. I had no plan, nowhere to go. My old friends had slowly drifted away after Samuel passed. Some had moved, some had grown distant, and others had faded into the fog of old age and forgotten phone numbers. I didn't want to burden them. That word, burden, clung to me like a second skin now. I couldn't escape it. I tried calling the only neighbor I still had a number for, Mrs. Delgado from 2 doors down, the one who used to bring her famous peach cobbler to our 4th of July barbecues. No answer. I stared at my phone screen for a long time before putting it back in my pocket. I walked, just started walking. I didn't know where to. I just knew I had to keep moving before I froze or collapsed. Every step felt like dragging bricks. My hip was flaring, the pain radiating down to my knee, but I kept going. After nearly an hour, I spotted a small strip of businesses a few blocks ahead, an all-night laundromat, a liquor store, and a 24-hour diner, with a faded red sign that flickered in and out. Melba's Grill, it said in cursive letters that had once been proud but now looked tired, like me. I pushed the door open and was met with warmth, actual blessed heat. It wrapped around me like a blanket. The smell of burnt coffee, fried onions, and something sweet, maybe pie, hit my nose. It was the best thing I'd smelled in weeks. The woman behind the counter glanced up, middle-aged, maybe in her 50s, dark red lipstick and tired eyes. She gave me a once-over, saw the suitcase, the coat, the exhaustion, and didn't say a word, just nodded toward a booth in the corner. I sat, slowly. My joints crackled like old newspapers. When she came over with a coffee pot, she raised an eyebrow. Cold out there. I nodded. My voice caught in my throat. Can I get a cup of hot tea? Please. The cheapest you've got. She poured coffee instead. This one's on the house, she said. You look like you need it more than I do. I didn't argue. I wrapped my hands around the mug and let the heat seep into my fingers tingled as they thawed. It hurt, but it was the kind of pain that reminded me I was still alive. As I sipped, I saw it, just to the left of the register. A wire rack of scratch-off lottery tickets, bright, glossy, out of place in the dim, greasy light of the diner. My husband Samuel used to call them fool's gold. The real lottery, he'd say, is making it through a week without the water heater breaking. But he was gone now, and so was my home, my pride, my plan. What did I have left to lose? When the waitress came back, I handed her 3 of my $5, 2 for the tea and 1 for a lottery ticket. She didn't blink, just plucked one off the rack and handed it to me. This one's lucky, she said with a half smile. Or maybe you are. I didn't scratch it right away, just slipped it into the pocket of my coat. I didn't even know why I bought it. Maybe out of habit, maybe out of desperation, maybe because hope, however foolish, was the only thing I had left to hold. She came back again a few minutes later with a plate, toast and scrambled eggs. I hadn't ordered anything else. I looked up, confused. Cook made extra, she said, sliding it in front of me like it was nothing. Don't worry about it. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. My body was too cold, too empty. So I just said, thank you, and ate like someone who didn't know when they'd eat again. When I finally left Melba's, it was past midnight. The wind had died down, but the air was still bitter. I made my way to the back of the diner, where a metal bench sat under a dim street lamp. I curled up on it, wrapping my coat tight around me. My suitcase still clutched like a lifeline. I pulled out the lottery ticket, held it up to the light. Maybe it was just a distraction. Maybe it was my last mistake. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something I hadn't dared to dream. I didn't sleep much that night. The metal bench behind Melba's was cold and unforgiving. The wind found its way into every opening of my coat, numbing my legs until I couldn't feel them. I curled into myself as tightly as I could, my suitcase jammed up against the side of the bench, one arm looped through the handle so no one could take it. Every few minutes, headlights would sweep across the street as a car passed, making me flinch. My fingers, clutched around the still unread lottery ticket, were stiff and aching. I must have drifted off sometime before dawn, because the next thing I remember was the feeling of a warm hand on my shoulder. I startled awake, heart thudding, half expecting Claire standing there with more cruelty on her lips. But it wasn't her. It was the woman from the diner. She had a wool coat on now, a knitted scarf looped loosely around her neck. In her hands, she held a styrofoam cup. "You're gonna freeze to death out here, honey," she said gently, crouching down to my level. "Come on inside. We open again in 20 minutes. You can sit in the back till the sun's up. I'll get you something hot." Her name was Lena Washington, and I would come to think of her as the guardian angel I never expected. I tried to speak, but the words came out as a rasp. My throat was dry. I nodded instead and slowly stood, every joint in my body protesting. The movement made the ticket fall from my coat pocket. I bent down and picked it up before she could see what it was. Not wanting to seem foolish. "Coffee or tea?" she asked. Once we were inside, the warm air enveloping me like a hug. "Tea," I croaked. "If it's not too much." "It's never too much," she said, disappearing behind the counter. Melba's looked different in the morning light, still faded, still tired, but cozier somehow. I took a seat at the same booth as the night before, and wrapped both hands around the steaming cup when she placed it in front of me. "Do you have someplace to go?" she asked after a while, her voice careful, respectful. I hesitated. The honest answer was no, but I didn't want to admit that, didn't want to look as broken as I felt. "I'll figure something out," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone, tapped a few buttons, and made a call. "Hi, Marcus. Yeah, it's Aunt Lena. No, everything's fine. Listen, I've got someone here who could use a hand. Nothing big, just a couple of nights, and maybe some advice on a situation. You in?" She hung up and looked back at me. "I've got a spare room upstairs above the diner," she said simply. "It's not fancy. Twin bed, old radiator, shared bathroom. But it's warm. You're welcome to it for a few nights at least." I stared at her. "Why are you helping me?" She smiled, and in her eyes I saw something that softened me, something I hadn't felt in months. Recognition. "Because someone once did it for me," she said, "and because I see a woman who deserves a damn break." I couldn't speak. I just nodded, my throat thick with tears I didn't want to shed. I went upstairs to her spare room shortly after. It was small, yes, just a bed, a cracked dresser, and one tiny window, but it was safe. It was mine. I took off my coat and shoes, laid the suitcase near the bed, and finally opened the lottery ticket. It felt ridiculous to even look. A ticket bought in desperation, with one of the last dollars I had, but I scratched it anyway. The first number, 17. The second, 17. My heart skipped. I rubbed my eyes. My fingers trembled as I scratched the last panel. 17. Three matching numbers. I blinked, unsure of what I was seeing. I flipped the ticket over, rereading the prize chart 3 times. 3 matching 17. Jackpot. Not a free ticket. Not $20. $800,000. I gasped aloud. I didn't believe it. I didn't understand it. But it was real. Suddenly the silence in the room was deafening. The walls closed in around me. I was sitting on a bed in a stranger's upstairs room, and I had just won more money than I had seen in my entire life. I didn't know what to do, so I did the only thing I could think of. I went back downstairs and showed it to Lena. She looked at the ticket, looked at me, then let out a slow, low whistle. "Well," she said, her voice calm but sparkling with joy, "looks like your luck just turned around." And in that small, faded diner with cracked vinyl seats, and a woman whose kindness defied logic, I realized it had. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. Not from pain, not from someone yelling or the clang of dishes in a kitchen I didn't own. I just woke up peacefully. For the first time in years, the small upstairs room above Melba's was still and warm. The radiator gurgled softly in the corner, and faint light crept through the curtain edges. For a moment, I forgot everything: the heartbreak, the cold night on the bench, the $5 that changed nothing, and everything. Then I remembered the ticket, $800,000. The number echoed in my mind like a hymn I didn't know how to sing yet. It still didn't feel real. I had barely slept after showing it to Lena. She called her nephew, Marcus, the man from the phone the night before. Turns out he worked at a local credit union and handled estate cases. She trusted him, and that was enough for me. He'd come by that evening, buttoned up and calm, with kind eyes like hers and a leather briefcase full of patience. He'd checked the numbers, cross-referenced the serial code, and verified it with the state lottery website. "Congratulations, Miss Carter," he said, offering me a gentle, genuine smile. "You're about to start a new chapter. A new chapter, not a continuation, not more of the same. A real, honest-to-God beginning." I didn't know how to process it. Money had always been something to manage, something tight, restrictive, something I gave away to others, rarely kept for myself. But now it was a door. Over the next few days, Marcus guided me through the process of claiming the prize quietly. I followed every piece of advice he gave: how to set up a trust, how to avoid press coverage, how to move with care. By the end of the week, after taxes and legal fees, $560,000 had settled into an account with my name on it. My name, not shared with Claire, not tied to Samuel's will, not property of someone else. Evelyn Carter, account holder, decision maker, woman in charge. The first thing I did was simple, almost silly. I bought a new coat. It was soft, warm, deep burgundy with real buttons and fleece lining. I tried it on in the store and stood in front of the mirror for 10 minutes just staring at myself. I almost didn't recognize the woman looking back, standing straighter, eyes brighter, not a trace of apology in her stance. The second thing I did was find an apartment, a real one, on the third floor of a clean, quiet building near the edge of town, with wide windows and soft carpet and a little balcony that overlooked a park. When I turned the key and stepped into that space, I felt something crack open inside me. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, warm, like a blossom opening after years of winter. I bought furniture that made me feel at home: a proper bed, a velvet reading chair, a lamp that gave off soft yellow light instead of harsh fluorescence. I chose framed prints for the walls, landscapes, oceans, quiet paths through forests. Every decision was mine. Every item I placed felt like a brick in the foundation of a new identity. And then, once I had a home, I remembered who I used to be. I used to love photography. Long ago, before Claire, before Samuel got sick, before arthritis and exhaustion wore me down, I used to take pictures with an old film camera. I would walk for hours, capturing sunlight through trees or the way frost clung to the edges of a leaf. So I walked into a camera shop downtown, run by a woman with lavender hair and a passion for helping beginners. I told her I wanted something sturdy and simple. She smiled like I had handed her a gift. With her help, I bought my first digital camera. It fit in my hands like it belonged there all along. I enrolled in a photography course at the community college. Evening sessions twice a week filled with curious minds and kind instructors. No one looked at me like I was too old or starting too late. They looked at my work, my eye, my perspective. One of my first assignments was to take a self-portrait. It terrified me, but when I finally turned the lens toward my own face and pressed the shutter, I didn't see a sick woman. I didn't see a burden. I saw Evelyn, not Claire's mother, not Samuel's widow, just Evelyn. And for the first time in my entire life, that was enough. The call came on a quiet Thursday afternoon just as I was making tea and looking through my photography assignments. My new phone, a sleek little thing Marcus had helped me pick out, buzzed on the kitchen counter. I glanced at the screen, expecting it to be Lena, or perhaps one of my classmates from photography club, but instead I saw a name I hadn't spoken aloud in weeks: Claire. I stared at it as it buzzed, once, twice, 3 times. The screen lit up with her picture, an old one from before everything, before she told me I was a burden, before she handed me $5 and pointed me toward the cold. For a brief moment I felt the familiar tug, the urge to answer, to hear her voice, to hope foolishly that maybe this time she would say she was sorry. But I had learned something in the stillness of my new life. Hope is not always harmless. Sometimes hope is a hook. And when you finally pulled yourself free, you think twice before reaching for the line again. I let it ring. The phone buzzed again 30 minutes later. This time I answered. Hello, Claire, I said calmly. A pause, then a soft, cautious voice. Hi, Mom. I wasn't sure if you'd pick up. I almost didn't, I replied truthfully. I saw something online, on the community news page, about a woman who won a lottery prize, a big one. And the photo, it looked like you. There it was. The reason, not concern, not love, curiosity wrapped in calculation. And, I said, my voice steady, another pause. A shaky inhale. Is it true? Yes? Silence again. A long one. Then came the next line, spoken like a script she had rehearsed. That's incredible, Mom. I'm so happy for you. Really, I've been thinking about you so much. The kids miss you terribly. I almost laughed. The performance was so transparent, I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. They didn't say a word to me that night. I replied softly. When I left. That night, Claire's voice faltered. It was complicated. I was overwhelmed. Work, the kids, your health scared me. I didn't handle it well. I know that, and I've regretted it every single day. She paused, letting the silence breathe, as if waiting for me to say something forgiving. I didn't. Maybe we could meet, she offered. Just talk? We miss you. Maybe come for dinner? Or coffee? I took a long, quiet breath. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I wasn't that woman on the porch, clutching $5 like it might keep her warm. I was Evelyn, the woman who had rebuilt her life, who knew the difference between an invitation and a transaction. I'll meet you, I said, but not at your house. I gave her the name of the little cafe 2 blocks from my apartment, a quiet, sunlit place with soft chairs and lemon scones I'd grown to love. It was neutral ground, but it was still mine. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., she agreed quickly, too quickly. The next day, I arrived 15 minutes early, took a table by the window, and ordered a cup of chamomile tea. I wore my soft blue sweater, the one that fit just right, and a necklace Samuel once gave me that I hadn't worn in years. When Claire walked in, she looked thinner, frazzled. Her makeup was carefully done, but her eyes darted around until they landed on me, and stayed there. I saw it. The pause, the small flicker of disbelief. She hadn't expected to find me calm. She hadn't expected to find me different. She expected her mother, the woman she controlled. Instead, she found Evelyn. The first few minutes were full of awkward small talk. The kids, the weather, her job. I nodded, sipping my tea, waiting. Then came the pivot. I heard about your apartment, she said, forcing a smile. That's amazing. And the photography thing. Wow, Mom, I'm so proud of you. Thank you, I said simply. It's the first time in my life I've done something just for me. She nodded, eyes flicking down to her cup. We've been having a rough time, actually. Gary's work dried up. We're behind on the mortgage. I didn't want to say anything, but it's been hard. There it was, the ask, the real reason, not an apology, not a reconnection, a pitch. I set my teacup down gently. Claire, I said softly, you didn't call because you missed me. You called because you heard I had money. She opened her mouth to deny it, but stopped, because she knew I was right. I didn't come here to argue, I continued, and I didn't come here to give you money. I came here to see if the daughter I loved was still in there somewhere. I looked at her for a long moment, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't hoping. I was just watching, waiting. Claire didn't answer right away. She just sat there, stunned, caught between the shame she refused to fully admit and the entitlement she hadn't yet learned to silence. Her fingers wrapped around the rim of her coffee cup, knuckles white. I let the silence hang, steady and uncomfortable. She finally looked up. So that's it then? She asked, her voice sharp beneath its brittle politeness. You're just cutting us off? There it was, the indignation, the inability to see that I wasn't the one who had walked away. You cut me off the night you handed me $7, I replied. I just finally believed you. Her jaw clenched. She looked around, embarrassed now, not by what she had done, but by being seen in a public place with a woman she could no longer control. I made a mistake, she said, eyes flashing. I said I was sorry. No, I said calmly. You said words, but you never truly said sorry. Because you still think you were right. You think you were justified. That I was inconvenient, disposable. I took a breath. You can't throw someone away and then come looking for them when it turns out they landed on their feet. I saw something flicker in her, rage perhaps, or maybe recognition. The waitress returned and asked if we needed anything else. I asked for a slice of carrot cake to go. Claire just shook her head, her mouth pressed in a tight line. You're choosing this, she said finally. You're choosing to keep your grandchildren from their grandmother. I studied her carefully. Her face was a mask of control, but her eyes were furious. I'm choosing peace, I said. I'm choosing not to re-enter a house where I was unwanted, where I was sick and left alone, and where love was conditional. I leaned forward, soft but firm. And if my grandchildren are kept from me, that will be your choice, not mine. One day they'll grow up, and when they do, they'll ask questions, and I will have answers. Claire stood abruptly. She fumbled in her purse, dropped her napkin, knocked her spoon onto the floor. When she finally looked at me again, her mouth was trembling. You'll regret this, she said quietly, coldly. No, I answered, standing too. I regretted staying silent for 60 years. I regretted mistaking guilt for love. But this is freedom. She left in a storm of footsteps and jangling keys. I sat down again, steadying my hands around my tea. I had imagined this moment so many times. What I'd say, how I'd feel. I thought there would be tears, maybe even anger. But instead there was only peace. Not joy, not yet, but peace. That evening I sat on the balcony of my apartment with a to-go slice of carrot cake and a glass of wine. The city lights blinked below, and in the stillness I felt something shift in me. I wasn't Evelyn the caregiver. I wasn't Evelyn the burden. I was Evelyn the woman who had survived. And now I was Evelyn the woman who would thrive. The next morning I took my first real step into a future I hadn't allowed myself to dream about. I signed a lease on a cottage just outside the city, a little stone house nestled in the arms of pine trees and wrapped in silence. There was a wide porch, perfect for rocking chairs and wind chimes. The kitchen had a window above the sink that looked out onto a sloping hill of wildflowers, and in the backyard I saw a lone apple tree, its leaves trembling in the spring breeze. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. I bought it in full, no mortgage, no ties, just a deed with my name. I painted the front door a soft teal blue, the color of a robin's egg. I planted basil and tomatoes in terracotta pots. I adopted a dog, an old mutt named Lacey, with wise eyes and a tail that thumped against the floor in rhythm with my new piece. Each day I found small moments of joy, a crackling fire on a rainy afternoon, a camera in my hands, catching the sunrise as it spilled through the pines, a handwritten letter from someone in my photography class, praising a photo I'd taken of two birds in flight. My life no longer revolved around proving my worth. It was built on knowing it. And every morning when I woke up in my warm bed, with my dog beside me and sunlight creeping across the floor, I knew I had chosen this life, not inherited it, not begged for it, chosen it. I wasn't looking for anything or anyone, that's the truth. After everything I had endured, all the bridges burned, I had quietly tucked my heart away in a safe place. Not in bitterness, not out of fear, but because I had learned the difference between being alone and being lonely. And for the first time in years, I was simply content. My days were peaceful. Mornings began with coffee on the porch, Lacey curled at my feet. I'd walk through the woods near the cottage, my camera slung across my chest, capturing little miracles, dew on spider webs, the way sunlight played with the mist, a fox disappearing into the underbrush. In the afternoons, I'd return to Bee's soul kitchen, now less a refuge and more a second home. Bee had become a sister to me in every way that mattered. We laughed, shared recipes, traded stories. On quiet days, I'd sit in the back booth editing photos while she prepped sweet potato pies and cornbread muffins. Her warmth filled every corner of the place, and I often wondered how many other lives she'd saved with nothing more than a hot meal and an open heart. It was there, one Saturday afternoon, that I first met Thomas. I'd seen him around town before, tall, silver-bearded, always in flannel and work boots. He had the look of someone who belonged to the land, with eyes that had seen pain and yet hadn't been hardened by it. B had mentioned him once or twice, called him Tommy, said he ran a woodworking shop outside town. I never thought much of it, until that day. He came in just after lunch rush, hands dusty with sawdust, and ordered a slice of lemon pie. Our eyes met across the room, and for a reason I couldn't name, I didn't look away. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, gesturing to the seat across from me. There was something easy in the way he asked, no pressure, no expectation, just an invitation. I nodded. He introduced himself as Thomas Reed. Retired Navy, now a carpenter. A widower for over a decade. I told him my name was Evelyn. That was all he needed. We talked for 2 hours, about everything, and nothing. He loved birds, built feeders by hand and placed them around the woods behind his shop. He showed me a picture on his phone. This ridiculous, beautiful handmade birdhouse shaped like a lighthouse. I told him I loved photography, and had once dreamed of seeing the lavender fields in France. He listened, I mean really listened, like every word mattered. When he finally stood to leave, he said, "You make me want to slow down and pay attention to the small things." I hadn't blushed in years, but I did then. Over the next few weeks, he'd stop by more often, sometimes just for a slice of pie, sometimes with a book he thought I might like. Once he brought me a small wooden box he had made. Inside was a note, "For your memory cards and little treasures." I smiled for the rest of the week. He didn't ask for anything in return. No declarations, no flirtations, just presence. Respect. He was kind to Lacey too. Always brought her little biscuits shaped like bones. She adored him instantly, always a good sign. One evening, we took a walk by the lake behind my cottage. The sun was dipping low, casting long gold shadows across the water. He asked if he could hold my hand. "I'm not sure what I have to offer anymore," I said quietly. He looked at me like I was made of starlight. "You have a heart that didn't harden, even after everything. That's rare. That's more than enough." I let him take my hand. It felt like coming home. We didn't rush. We didn't need to. Some days he'd bring scrap wood and let me help sand pieces in his shop. Other days I'd drag him along to photograph wildflowers or abandoned barns. We made soup together on rainy afternoons. We learned how to be quiet together without it ever feeling empty. It was gentle, the kind of love I didn't know existed. The kind that doesn't demand or consume, but simply holds space. One day as we sat on my porch watching the trees sway, he turned to me and said, "I know we're a little older, a little banged up, but if you ever wanted to spend the rest of your days with someone who sees you, truly sees you, I'd be honored to be that someone." My eyes filled before my heart could catch up, and I said yes, not because I needed him, but because I wanted him in the life I had built, on my terms. With no apology, I was standing at my kitchen window watching the morning sun catch the tips of the pines when my phone rang. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Denise. I'd felt her presence coming like a storm long before her name ever lit up my screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Hello, Denise." There was hesitation, a breath, then her voice, sweet and practiced. "Mom, I saw the article about the lottery. Is it true?" "Yes," I said simply. "Oh, Mom, that's incredible. We've all been so worried since you left. The kids, they miss you." I closed my eyes. That familiar ache rose, but it didn't control me anymore. "When you threw me out," I said calmly, "I had $5, no coat, a fever, and you told me I was a threat. Remember?" The line went silent. That silence, that perfect stammering pause, it told me everything. "Mom, I'm so sorry," she said eventually. "I wasn't myself. I panicked. That wasn't me." "It was," I said softly. "But that doesn't matter now. What matters is, I'm not going back." When she walked into B's the next day, she didn't recognize me at first. I'd gotten there early, deliberately. I was wearing my new emerald green sweater, hair styled, spine straight, a woman in full bloom, not the ghost she'd last seen. Her eyes widened when she realized it was me. She recovered quickly. pulling her usual performance. Sweet smiles, casual charm. The kids were with her, subdued, confused. I ached for them. "We want you back, Mom," she said. "The house hasn't been the same without you." "Why now?" I asked, voice gentle but steady. "Last month I was a burden, a health risk. What changed?" Her face paled, her voice cracked. "We're family. That's what matters." I smiled, not with warmth, but with a calm that came from being unshakable. Family doesn't throw you out in the cold. Family doesn't buy your silence with 7 crumpled dollars. The mask slipped then. Her eyes sharpened. "So that's it? You're rich now, and we mean nothing to you?" "No," I said. "It's not about the money. It's about dignity. And you lost the right to mine when you locked the door behind me." As I stood to leave, I looked at Jasmine and Jordan and said gently, "You can visit me anytime. Ask your father to call." I kissed their foreheads, ignoring Denise's rage burning beside them. I walked out with my head high, the way you do when you finally realize the door you walked through leads to freedom, not exile. They once called me a burden, but all I needed was the right soil. And now, I bloom. I didn't realize just how tightly the world had been wound around my shoulders until I felt it begin to fall away. With Denise gone, and the chains of obligation broken, my life slowly unfolded like petals after a long winter frost. It began with something simple, a walk through the city park with my camera slung across my shoulder. The trees were just beginning to blush with spring, and children's laughter rang out like music through the branches. I stood beneath a blossoming cherry tree, raised my camera, and for the first time in decades, captured beauty for no one but myself. That photo became the first piece in my portfolio. I started small, weekend markets, local cafes that were willing to hang art from residents. B, of course, insisted on putting 2 of my pieces up in her kitchen. "They make the food taste better," she said with a wink. But then something remarkable happened. Mrs. Talbot, my photography teacher, a warm, sharp-eyed woman with streaks of silver in her hair, pulled me aside after class one day. "You've got something here, Evelyn," she said. "You should submit your work to the annual gallery show, real juried exhibit, the kind that matters." I laughed it off at first. Me? A 63-year-old woman with a second-hand camera and barely a year's experience. But Walter, ever my quiet anchor, took my hand and said, "You see what others miss. That's the whole point." So I submitted 5 pieces. 3 were accepted. On opening night I stood in a softly lit gallery, watching strangers lean in to examine the world as I saw it. One lingered in front of my shot of an elderly man sitting alone by a fountain, his hands folded in his lap, eyes closed as if listening to a song no one else could hear. She turned to her companion and whispered, "That reminds me of my grandfather." And just like that, I understood what art really was. A connection, a whisper between souls. I didn't stop there. I started writing small essays to go with my photos, reflections on time, memory, forgiveness. B helped me create a website. Walter, ever supportive, carried my camera bag and kept my coffee warm on photo walks. The gallery offered me a solo show that fall. My name, Evelyn Morgan, printed on a clean white placard beside a wall of my work. I didn't sell every piece, but I didn't need to. I had already bought back my own life. I filled my days with intention. Mornings began with tea and walks by the water. Afternoons were for editing, reading, or sitting with Bea as she prepped for dinner rush. Sometimes I'd spend the evening in the small sunroom I'd converted into a studio, experimenting with light and shadows, while Daisy snoozed at my feet. But more than anything, I allowed myself to be proud. Not loud, not boastful, just quietly, deeply proud. Of the courage it took to say no, of the joy I found in simple things, of the voice I rediscovered through the lens. People sometimes assume that life starts big, with marriage, children, careers, but I think, for many of us, the true beginning waits until we've let go of what others expect. For me, life began the day I stopped apologizing for surviving. If you had asked me 2 years ago what my story would look like, I would have pointed to a quiet ending, a slow fade into the background, an invisible woman, useful but not seen, loved perhaps but never quite valued. But life had other plans. Today I live by the lake in a house that smells of fresh coffee, pine, and possibility. Daisy naps in patches of sunlight by my feet. Walter whistles while working on a birdhouse out back. My photographs hang in real galleries, not just on fridge doors or folded into forgotten albums. And my mornings begin not with chores or criticism, but with peace. There are still shadows, still moments when memories knock at the edges of my joy. I think of Denise sometimes, of the daughter I raised with every ounce of my heart, of the pain that followed, and the silence that came after. But I've made peace with silence. I've learned that forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation, that love can be unconditional. But access to your life must come with terms. I no longer beg to be seen. I no longer shrink to make others feel big. I live fully now, authentically, boldly. And that's why I wanted to share this story. Because maybe, just maybe, someone out there feels like I did, unwanted, overlooked, tired in ways that sleep doesn't fix. Maybe you've spent too long giving everything you had, only to be told it wasn't enough. So here's what I want to say. You are not a burden, you are not disposable, and it is never, never too late to begin again. I started over with $7 and a fever. I found kindness in a stranger's kitchen. I found family in a dog's gentle sigh. I found purpose through a camera lens. I found love, not the romantic kind alone, but the kind that sees you, respects you, and walks beside you. And most of all, I found me. So if this story moved you, even just a little, I invite you to stay. Subscribe, like, comment, not because it helps the algorithm, but because every small tap reminds us we are here and we matter. Share your story with me. The quiet ones, the funny ones, the hard ones. Tell me about your comeback, your turning point, your private dream you never dared to speak aloud. I'll be reading, and together we'll keep building this little corner of the internet where no one is invisible. From my heart to yours. Thank you.